And here we are. It's Startup Hiring. We're live, and we're here with Tanya Hyams-Young, CEO and co-founder of SourceAI. Tanya, welcome.
Hi, nice to see you, Simon.
And you too, my friend. For those absolute heathens that may not have heard of you, you're obviously CEO of SourceAI, which is a decision intelligence platform used by sort of large-scale subscription businesses that allow them to make better choices around their advertising, their pricing, their churn, everything to do with sort of their customer base. Not
Well,
robots, it's not chatbots or anything like that. Is that a fair description?
very good. Very,
Oh,
very, very accurate.
let's get straight into it. Tell me, what's it like working in a business where you're selling and building AI products that you've been doing since before the AI hype window that we're now in?
What a great question. Well, I like to think of it as before the common era and
Okay.
after the common era of
Yeah.
AI. Before the common era, November 23, when GPT launched, we spent most of our time educating people. I think it's fair to say there were really two types of execs. There were those that were enthusiastic about everything, the kind of
Mm-hmm.
lolly shop folks.
Mm-hmm.
And, on the other side of that, you've got the deep distrusters, people
Right.
that would be like, that's science fiction. No way is that possible. I don't believe
Mm.
you. And so, it was a gentle and relatively difficult thing to be dealing with executives at those extremes. On the one hand, you need to encourage them and be educational, but on the other hand, you need to be really excited about the potential and those kind of things. So, before the common era, it was mostly about educating. But of course, ChatGPT has changed everything. It's changed the landscape completely. I think it's fair to say these days that nobody feels as though they don't know what AI is. It's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you don't have to tell them how to spell AI.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it doesn't necessarily mean they know AI. The domain of machine learning, for example, is one of the really important areas where we do, really deep learning and deep analytics on business. And it's really become overshadowed by the latest generation of agentic and LLMs and so on. So now, what are we doing? Now, I think the selling into this domain is less about educating, but it really is about exploring the art of the possible. And I think, where this goes is not so much to continue to explain that things can be done, because I think people realize that pretty much anything can be done these days. But the big question really is to not just ask, can I do it, but should I do it? And is AI the right choice? So I think these days we're less about educating and way more about making sure that people can realize impact through AI.
Yeah. And there's an interesting ethical question there, isn't there? Should I? I was reading something recently about sort of what the future of AI roles might look like. And I think in larger enterprise businesses where huge amounts of customer data perhaps are getting used and manipulated, not sure if that's the right phrase, should there be an AI ethics officer? Like, is that a future role that we're potentially going to see? I think that there'll be something along those lines. What do you think?
Absolutely. Ethics and the psychology of it are just so important. We're dealing with business data, but as soon as we start thinking about individual and personal data, we really should be asking ourselves, actually as individuals, we should be asking ourselves, is it something I want to share?
Yeah.
And then, we should be challenging those people that are the creators of some of these tools. Is that something I give you permission to use?
Yes.
And of course, from a business point of view, that leads into a really different discussion around the ethics of using that kind of data and the right kind of scenarios to actually really be leveraging somebody else's information.
Yeah. Do you think that might be, if it's not already, some kind of opt-in for B2C businesses where there's already, in terms of business that none of us read, there's probably something there around, using your personal data, but using your data for machine learning or for AI purposes. Is that something that's going to be more of an opt-in that's more clearly signaled in terms?
I'd love to see that being the case, but I think the reality is the tide is already
right.
The tide is coming. Yeah, so I think that would be extremely difficult.
Yeah. Going back to your comment around educating potential customers, working with prospects, do you think that have we tipped over a point where where a lot of execs think of AI as more than just LLM, because I think for a long time, most of them just thought of it as LLM and not really thinking beyond that.
I don't know that we have actually.
Right.
My feeling, and I was reading a study from BCG maybe or McKinsey the other day. It was saying something like 68% of executives still weren't quite sure about whether they were using LLMs
Right.
or real machine learning.
Mm,
So that tells me that I think we're still in the domain where there is actually a lot of uncertainty around it, and perhaps uncertainty is the wrong word. Actually, perhaps there's just a lack of common understanding.
mm,
You know, and the fact that there are so many people that overnight have become experts and
mm.
influencers around
Yeah.
AI, that really tells you that they didn't just go out and get university degrees and become data scientists, right? They have some expertise around probably something that's a bit more approachable, like an LLM.
Yeah. Yeah. I know your team. For anyone watching, listening, Tanya and I have worked together previously. Otherwise, there's no way she would have agreed to come on this podcast. But I know that your team is really heavily made up of really heavy hitting data scientists. Has being able to have that sort of conversation when you're talking about the mechanics of ML or AI that you're building with prospects, does that change the level of comfort that prospects have?
I think so. I think it does. There's I think a big difference in thinking about data science as a job to do versus a product to use. And
Yep.
where we really have great conversations is when we're dealing with incredibly curious people that know how to get things done. They know that they can go off and build a workflow, build a website, build an app, whatever it is. But when it comes to the domain of AI, they're not sure how to put all those things together into a product. And I think that that's a really interesting conversation because that's an appreciation of the many roles that you need to build AI products. You need domain experience. That's a thing that often gets overlooked, especially for small startup teams.
Yeah.
Secondly, you need engineers. You need people that know how to build repeatable, reliable software that doesn't fall over, that doesn't break, that deals with the edge cases. You need people that understand the data and not just understand it, but really want to put their hands deeply into it.
Yeah.
And you need, of course, the amazing PhD level data scientists that really
Mm.
hard about these problems. And I think, people still are a little unclear that when you're building product, that's the kind of roles you need. It's not one data scientist does not make AI.
And I'm guessing as well for a platform of yours that's the customers using where there's millions of records of data, things like stability and scalability are going to be incredibly important as well.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
what you're talking about.
That's right. And, it's a good, when you think about, the lessons for startups, one of the things that we have been, I'm going to say lucky, but it's not really luck. It's the good judgment of having had 3 amazing PhD level qualified experts in this from the beginning. But you can't make the kind of choices that don't end up with things being thrown away. You make solid infrastructure choices. You make tooling choices. You make, graphing and visualization choices. And they're all things that you can increment rather than, build something, throw it away, realize that it hasn't been reliable, perhaps realize it doesn't meet requirements or it's too onerous. The lesson, really should be, bring in highly qualified experts at the beginning, and then you don't have that regretful spend in the tech debt that you otherwise might.
Yep. Yep. And have you seen since this sort of watershed moment of ChatGPT, have you seen a real change in either sort of inbound inquiry or the response that maybe you're getting in initial sort of prospect calls or prospect demos around the AI components of what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like it's not a new thing, is it? Sex sells, and there's no doubt that the LLM aspect is incredibly sexy when you're showing something like that. People are very excited by it. But I think the really great prospects and the great conversations are with people that are genuinely curious, and not looking to disprove what AI is or machine learning is telling them.
Right.
They're looking to get deeper, understand more. And the people that are incredible at this, and we have one particular customer, she knows who she is. that is so curious. I better not name her though. She's so curious, and she's a fantastic customer because, for every question there are another 15 questions
Yeah.
that just go get you deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's really only with that kind of level of curiosity that you really, unburden these kind of tools and really let them scale for you.
Amazing. Just picking up on a phrase you used then, disprove. Have you had that with customers or with prospects probably in the past where they don't necessarily believe that what your platform does is doable?
100%. In fact, I was just talking to someone this morning, and we were laughing about the fact that when we first designed our own platform called Atlas, out my own team said, Tanya, that's science fiction. That's not possible. I mean, so of course, and of course now we've built it, and it's not science fiction anymore. It's really true. But yeah, I mean, there is such a level of I don't know, is that really the case? And and AI is a little different, and I think for those that are really knowledgeable in this domain, it's synonymous with experimentation. And if you're not prepared to be right, or on the opposite hand, be very wrong, then you're probably not wielding this in quite the right way. So there should be a natural skepticism. But the people that are out there to disprove things, I mean, that's not curiosity. That's just willing something not to be.
Yeah. So just talking internally for a second then, because I think that's really interesting sort of dynamic where your team are not sure if something's possible. To me, this is sort of like a classic early stage startup story, right? We've got this vision. We think we know what we can build. We're not 100% sure, but we're going to go for it. What was the reaction from the team when you might have had an internal demo about, here you go, look what we've done, and people are like, oh, yeah, is that a real thing?
It really is, and it's an amazing moment. We used to have a philosophy. Let's just focus on one thing. Let's make sure that we can bill $1. Let's make, and when we launched this platform, what we all agreed was, let's build it, but then let's see whether anyone's actually willing to pay for it. And then the next milestone is, let's see whether someone's willing to pay, X number of dollars for it.
Yeah.
And, then let's see if we can, if someone overseas was willing to pay. So the kind of milestones that the team have really got behind.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because there's this sort of philosophy that I think the more mature software businesses have had for a long time before even sort of the sort of purest of startup world, is that even sort of large scale enterprise CRM or SaaS type businesses, they never build product without industry buy-in. How do you know if you're building the right thing? Coming back to your comment earlier, how did you know that you were on the right path? Were you getting people from prospects that were sort of providing input? I know you personally come from the background that you're building for, so you had a degree of industry knowledge and insight anyway. But how are you getting validation?
That is a great question. Look, the first aspect of it is when you're designing a new category and you're very early in it. I mean, we were certainly one of the earliest talking about the domain of decision intelligence and, fighting against massive brands like Pega. It's not easy. But I think initially you need to have a very clear idea of what the business problem is. And, that I think the fastest way to achieve that is to have that domain expertise and domain experience. But that doesn't mean, if I put it like this, if I went to somebody in the same role as I was in, when I thought about this kind of domain problem, and you said to them, what do you need? They wouldn't necessarily describe what it is you build. What they would describe as their business problem. So you have to be able to have a lot of empathy with the business problem and understand it, not just from their, the jobs they do, but from the jobs they do, the revenue that it creates, the, the cost, the levers, the, every aspect of that, which is, I think, why, some of the startups that you see doing incredibly well come from that really deep domain, domain experience that they're then servicing.
And do you think that's because you can have a meaningful conversation with a prospect because you've been in their shoes? And I think once they get that, there's a degree of credibility that comes with that.
There is, and when they don't know what to ask for, it means that you actually can paint a picture for them that's
Yep.
grounded in their problems, but perhaps a very different and new way of doing it.
Yeah.
And that was the case for us.
And where I was going with that line, with the previous question, was from a hiring perspective, hiring people who combine something that isn't widely adopted yet, that is still, in inverted commas, maybe a pipe dream, but have the conviction to be able to go out and talk to prospects and sell and even build from an engineering perspective, with no guarantee that this thing is going to go where we all want it to, despite best intentions. How challenging is that from a hiring perspective?
For our team, it wasn't as hard as you might think, actually, partly because of you, Simon.
Ta-da.
I know you didn't pay me to say that. But I think the way that I think about it is it's really about people first and product, and those kind of things should lead to profitability and revenues.
Yeah.
And I think when you think about it like that, the hiring choices you make are firstly the kind of people that, especially in an early stage, are the people that can put their hands to lots of things.
Yeah.
But they put them to lots of things not with frustration or with any of the negativity, but with curiosity and with pure interest in learning different things and being great at many things. And then, of course, as you grow into needing to what I call the glue roles. The people that are more specialized, and without them, you can't scale. So I think as a challenge for hiring, my recommendation would be, really think about the people who are helpful to build product because they've got flexibility and expertise together. And then as you grow, you need to kind of plug the gaps so that you're bringing in like strong expertise, even certifications and those kind of things that help all of those people to be to kind of move on to the next thing, or elevate what they're up to, and then the theory goes that profitability takes care of itself, right?
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot, quite deeply about this sort of early stage recently, and I think I've landed on this thing of in early stage businesses where the future is uncertain, the path isn't clear. I think that the problem that most, or the challenge that most leaders think of when they're hiring is they hire people to do a role, not to help you achieve a mission. And I think they're two different things. People who just want a job, in inverted commas, and it's 9 to 5, I do these things, I get a performance review and everything's going where it needs to go. Like, that's fine, but that isn't necessarily what you need in early stage business. And I think you hit the nail on the head with this phrase, curiosity, and people see a problem and they err towards fixing it because of their curiosity and their desire to want to push things forward, not saying, well, that's not in my job spec, that's not what I do. And again, they're not saying one's right, one's wrong, but they're kind of different hiring use cases, if you like, for the stage of the business you're at.
They are, and I think it takes hiring the kind of people that you don't mind throwing ideas with, that you will always respect each other's point of view, because even the most junior person in these kind of brands can be incredibly valuable because they come at something from a very different point of view. I mean, I'm a huge fan of hiring for both diversity and with relatively loose job descriptions.
Yeah.
With a lot of flexibility. Like, all of my contracts, the teams have, hybrid working. They have, meaning if they go overseas for, a month or something, visit family in France or, wherever, no problem. They can take a laptop and be plugged in. But also they should be allowed and able to work with flexible hours and from flexible physical locations, even in Sydney, where we are, just to make it possible for, different people to contribute, because the diversity just brings such a richer set of experiences around product building and a really unique culture.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So when you're selling the business to potential candidates, how do you find that balance of trying to be really clear about where the business stage you're at and what your next milestone is, and it might be achieving X in revenue or gearing up for Series A or whatever it is? How do you balance that, being really clear about the future and not wanting to give people surprises, with delivering some comfort that, hey, we're going in the right direction, but it is a little bit of wet finger in the air and we're all making the best decisions we can?
It's a good question. I think that, it comes down to communication, doesn't it? But it also comes to me, as to who's involved in the recruitment process.
Mm-hmm.
I am a big believer that, you should involve the people that a candidate works for
Mm-hmm.
and works with.
Yep.
So when we hire, we make sure that you've got a person that is, ostensibly the hiring manager,
Yep.
as well as potentially the person they work next to or
Yep.
adjacent to,
Yep.
because that then sets the boundaries and allows
Mm-hmm.
somebody to understand, who and how they work
Yeah.
alongside someone, as well
Yeah.
as, the expertise of the person above them, and then, our recruitment process allows me to then just kind of have a check-in in terms of
Yeah.
culture and fit and those kind of things.
Yeah. And I think, again, you touched on an important point there. And one of the things that I don't think gets talked enough about in most recruitment processes is how work happens.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of companies will talk about, this is our tech stack, this is what we're building, these are the things we're doing. But they don't talk enough about how work happens. So,
right.
Can everybody push to production? Do we do a demo and we test things before they go live? How do we make these changes? What's the process? And I think that those sorts of conversations, particularly for early stage businesses, can allow you to compete with some of the bigger name businesses when you're really clear about those things, because you can tap into more of the alignment of how people work, not just the actual work they do.
That's right. But, I think it's a mistake to think it's a one-off job to hire. I mean, you have to continue to compel people to want to work with you, because especially in startup mode, things change. You have your tough times, you have your great times, you have times where you're so busy that, nobody's sleeping and everyone's cranky, and, you really need clear communication in those times. And especially when you're scaling, because all of a sudden there's a little bit of uncertainty for the person that came in because they, love the person they were working for or working with, then all of a sudden, everyone's kind of scaling and you've got another person doing, a similar job. You have to make sure that you're continuously communicating and continuously making sure that that the team is all aligned and pointing at the same thing. And really clear about what your next stage of growth is, because, if not, then it's a huge amount of uncertainty. And I think that's when startup brands see, attrition caused.
So I'm interested, Tanya. So how do you sort of think about this challenge of hiring, and you're trying to manage burn, and then trying to balance when's the right time to hire? How have you approached that?
I think the right way to approach it is to start with a master in a new geography. It creates so much referenceability and gives you so much more, more credentials in a market. It gives you PR and marketing potential, and it gives salespeople something to leverage off. So I think my advice is really to spend the time thinking about the right kind of customer.
Yeah.
And I think one of the lessons that I have with the right kind of customer is the right kind of customer that actually is going to properly value your product, as they grow. I think it's very tempting to kind of go, oh, we'll just find our reference customer. Perhaps they're too small. I mean, that's an important consideration with our data science, right? You need to have a decent amount of data to work from.
Yeah.
So the right kind of customer that's going to stick with you. And that, I think, is the leverage point for then starting to scale. And I think there's some great models, fractional salespeople doing fly in, fly out to make sure that you've got a great delivery cadence using, at-home resources and those kind of things, before you start to take a huge investment into, effectively putting a team on the ground.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've also learned is that there's a lot of harm you can do to the people back home as you scale, and you have to be really ready to and mature in terms of how you handle things operationally. Otherwise you just everyone's burning candles at every end. You're up every night on sales calls and delivery calls and everything. If you can be mature about the way that you set up the operations, and you maybe make it a little bit more of a streamlined approach. So that everybody's ready for you to scale at that. That I think would be incredibly valuable.
Yeah. And I think, just for anyone watching or listening, just to, if people are maybe scratching their head a little bit, SourceAI it's a B2B business, but it's not sort of a lower end sort of subscription business. It's more large-scale subscription-based companies, so it's a higher price point of entry for them. So finding these masthead customers, as you call it, it's probably a longer sales cycle rather than, we're not driving traffic to the site, got a video demo and people just sign up. So it's a slightly different sales process. So just sort of
That's
chuck
exactly
that in
right.
there.
Yeah. Exactly.
Talk to me a little bit then about how your approach to hiring has maybe evolved over the years since you started.
Look, I am all about people. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's initially, I suppose, looking back 3 or 4 years, we would have taken the approach of being a bit more specific about expertise.
Mm-hmm.
The real thing that we have learned is that it is about these slightly more amorphous job roles.
Yeah.
And it's about the full contribution that a person can make, rather than, a very strict job role.
Yeah.
In the early days, the team hired, I think we only hired one person this way. They said to me, "You've got to hire this guy. He is great. She's got exactly the right skills." But you have this little alarm bell that goes, "Is this person going to be a cultural fit?" And I think in the early days, you're kind of more inclined to we need exactly these skills.
Yeah.
But actually, I think that's not necessarily the only way to look at it. I think you need a combination of both skills and personality that makes them fit into and work well within the team.
Yeah. So some values alignment, and again, probably ties into what we talk about: the way you work, the way we communicate, the way we talk to each other, and get work done, as well as the actual what. Yeah. So I guess you could maybe summarize that in terms of perhaps the rigidity that sometimes we have around position descriptions, the way we think about the requirements of the role.
Yeah, and that comes right from experience. Having worked in larger companies and those kind of things, that you need to have that rigidity. But it's not. I think it's not necessarily the same when you work for a startup.
Yep. Ties nicely into my next question. What have you learned about leadership over the last few years?
Well, I love the people, product, profitability, the 3 Ps.
Yeah.
I've learned that great people and the right people go so far for you. They may not always have the exact skill that you need, but they will always try. They will be flexible when you need them to be flexible.
Yeah.
They will, do things like travel or do calls at night and those kind of things. You just cannot replace the people side of the hiring choice that you make.
Yeah.
So I think leadership, for anyone that has got any doubts, leadership is, in my opinion, so much more about people than most leads.
Yeah.
I've also learned that sometimes the rigidity that we have as founders into describing our business in certain ways is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
It's a blessing because it is the thing that gets you up every day, gets everybody focused. But it can be a curse, when the market is against you, or when it's sales cycles take a little bit longer. Having that kind of rigidity holds you back from the kind of potential that others may see in you, that you haven't allowed yourself to see.
Yeah. You talked about potential there. Again, a nice segue. How do you see as the potential growth for the particular sort of brand of AI that you and the team are building?
I think there's over the next few years, I would like to think there's a bit of a kind of a return to people asking the question around measurement.
Right.
I think one of the things that's happening at the moment is that we're all very obsessed with shiny toys. And connecting those shiny toys to more shiny toys.
Yeah.
But we really don't ask ourselves, was that faster? Was it better?
Yeah.
Did it have the right effect? Could it have had more effect? And the particular brand of machine learning that my team are working on is all about impact. It's about practical, explainable, and impact. And, I think when you think about it in that kind of way, I think the future will be a bit of a reckoning, if you like,
Okay.
around, the generic application of AI. And I hope more consideration around the importance of that domain expertise and the ability for you to gain great impact when you measure and refine and experiment all the time. and really take the time to properly understand, not to the points that you are, a distruster,
Yeah.
but to the points that you are curious, and really thinking about, impact and how you measure that.
Back in the days of hiring for major global ERP implementation projects, one of the roles we used to hire quite frequently was benefits realization manager. In other words, we spent gazillions of dollars on rolling out this thing. We've taught users internally how to use it, and we've let customers know the impact on them. But now we need to make sure that we're getting all the benefits out of it. I guess what you're talking about there maybe ties into this mindset of, yes, we've implemented this thing. We've gone through potentially some headaches around aligning systems, aligning thinking. Now, how do we know we're getting the most out of it?
That's right. And, fast is good, right? And it's good to get faster.
Yep.
But it's not necessarily fast on its own.
You've been a sort of a champion for a while now of women in the tech sector. How do we get more women interested in technology? And I think the follow-up question to that is, how do we sell this notion that the technology industry is more than just programming? Because I think that seems to be sort of the default for a lot of women, the young women particularly, that might be thinking about coming into this sector. I don't want to be a programmer.
Yeah. Look, I am a big advocate for women in tech, and especially in AI, and there are some fantastic data scientists that are women. It's a particular challenge for startups, right? Because when you've got, you can hire 10 people, let's say, you need the 10 people that you can find that are there, that are the best, and oftentimes those that are applying for jobs are men, and in fact it is a very real problem. My team have taken the view that actually, and by the way, it's not just women that are in a minority here, it's race, diversity, and all of those things as well. But my team have taken the view of not always trying to tick the boxes as rigidly, and try to make sure that you've got your hiring. If there are 10 people and only one of them is a woman, you really need to allow the woman the opportunity to be at least shortlisted and interviewed, even if on paper the skills don't look quite the same. Because of course you'll never hire a woman, as an example. But you'll never hire a woman if you don't interview them. So you kind of have to give them the leg up in the process, so that your process facilitates that. But I think in terms of inspiring more women to be a part of this sector, there's just I think really this domain expertise and understanding the fact that the experience that you have, whether it's programming or not, is very valuable, especially so in this domain of AI. And I think the visibility of amazing people like Dr. Kelly Nashel at Deloitte, they're incredible people who have really put themselves right out in front, and I hope they're inspiring a generation of women, because they are remarkable people.
And I guess there's some challenges around how we and I'm talking about kids in school who are thinking about where their career might go and what they want to do. I still think there's some more grassroots level stuff we can do of having some of these larger businesses, the Canvas, the Airwalloxes, who've got sort of some critical mass, to get more sort of grassroots conversations happening and getting involved in careers evenings and just going and talking to a whole bunch of students and showing that this is a sector that the women can go to in as well.
That is right. And, I think, as a mom of two boys, my boys need great examples in men, but, lots of girls need to see and have exposure to women in these kind of roles. Otherwise, they can't be it because they don't see it. And
what does the future hold for your business this coming year? What are the things that you're focusing on?
We are focused on a couple of things, actually. The first is continuing to get traction in overseas markets. Very curious at the moment in the Asian market. And really enjoying working with some folks in the Middle East as well. So, for any startup, I would really encourage you to have a look at the Middle East as a market. It's
Yeah.
a, fantastic opportunity,
Mm.
and, I think if anybody gets the opportunity to go work overseas, just take it. It's such
Yeah.
a great opportunity and you'll never regret it. So that's a big thing for us. The other thing that we're working on is to expand our portfolio so that we are less specific about just being inside our own vertical and being
Mm-hmm.
product focused, and instead kind of realizing the potential that we have to build products um, as data science and data products, which is something that I think many brands, especially large corporates, really struggle to build
Mm.
products out of
Mm.
these kind of things. So
Mm.
I think we're really interested in starting to build that kind of productized solutions part of our business, as well as
Nice.
continuing to license what we already do.
Brilliant. And what's something that you wish you'd known when you first started the business?
I suppose I wish I had. Um, hmm, I suppose that I wish that there was a way to uh, make allow everybody in the business to have a understanding of the goals and the aspirations of a startup.
Mm-hmm.
You can paint a vision, but the
Yeah.
vision talks a lot more about product than business.
Right.
And I think if I started all over again,
Mm-hmm.
helping the entire team to continue to have a real clear understanding of not just the product that we're all working to, and not just the market potential and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, but what that really means in terms of the business being successful.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that would be is a very powerful thing, actually.
Mm. Mm. So maybe not everyone focuses on this aspirational view, but also the day-to-day meaning and the perhaps more incremental growth that you need to focus on.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's where individuals, the rigidity of roles
Mm. Mm.
can play against you, right?
Yeah.
Because if you are running a successful business, like cash, your runway, all of those kind of things are as important as you building the product that's ultimately going to create you and drive your
Yeah.
profitability.
Yeah.
And the more that everyone comes on that journey, not to say that if not to say that everyone should, be looking over the P&L each month,
Mm.
but
Mm.
certainly the more that people understand the levers, I think the
Yeah.
more their behavior can support
Mm.
support the
Mm.
the business as well as a product.
Yeah. Yep. I think I've got a piece coming out. I might have had a piece go out recently around some of that sort of communication cadence internally and how to manage some of that sort of challenging stuff. And I agree. I think you need to be really, really upfront with people. When you have a challenging quarter from a sales perspective or something, or revenue's not going where it needs to go. And I think people appreciate the honesty if you're going to that conversation then with, but this is what it means and this is how we're fixing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
It's
right.
never easy though, and there's always there's probably always decisions you make. Certainly with some of my business in the past, decisions you make that you look back on, you go, "Oh, probably could have handled that a bit differently." But
Yeah.
yeah, the only thing I think you can do is try and improve next time that sort of thing comes up and learn from it and move forward. If you're continually looking back and questioning everything you ever did, you'll just drive yourself mad.
Yeah. And of course, sharing your experience with
Mm,
others that are,
mm,
perhaps earlier in the journey than you.
yeah. Tanya, this has been brilliant. I'm mindful of time. Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. If people want to find you, if any women in the AI space wanted to talk to you, I'll include your LinkedIn profile and they can contact you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Cheers.